Hi, everyone. My name is Eddie Pauline, and I serve as the Director of Economic Engagement for The Ohio State University. I'm here with Henry Golatt, who serves as the Small Business Concierge for the City of Columbus. And Henry, appreciate you joining us today to talk about your work and the impact on the community.
Thank you, Eddie, for having me. Looking forward to the discussion.
And so I thought we could talk a little bit about the small business agenda, and then I've got a couple other questions for you about the impact of that work.
We started out on a journey a few years ago back. I guess, as you indicated, I'm not originally from Columbus, but I been here long enough now to call Columbus home. I'm from Arkansas and spent quite a bit of time in higher education doing this work. Upon coming to Columbus, we found out that there was this real aggressive activity that was happening in the small business community, but it wasn't as coordinated as probably it could be. And so we started thinking about how could we add some value in that regard. We created this opportunity. The mayor launched the Reimagining Small Business Initiative, if you will, centered on thinking through how could the city take a more active, progressive role in supporting small business. And so the small business agenda frames that up pretty good. And just to share with you what we define as the small business agenda is, it's basically the agenda is a city-sponsored strategic and collaborative multi-agency strategy that prioritizes inclusive entrepreneurship. And so at its crust, we're really trying to aggregate entrepreneurial outcomes and then be able to measure that over time, because we think and we know the data shows that entrepreneurship is a viable economic development strategy for a large city or a rural city, a rural community as well. So,
how is this work specifically sort of moving the needle in a positive direction for our people of color in our community, the Black community here in Columbus?
So African Americans have always been entrepreneurial. I mean, when you think about it, every year we, of course, lift up the African American community with this being African American Month, and you hear stories about the inventor, the agriculturalists and others, but African Americans have always been entrepreneurs. And so what we have found in my work, in my career doing this work, is that we're not always been properly resourced. And so when you think about access to resources, the small business agenda and the work that we're doing, what we're doing is really setting the paradigm, changing the paradigm around how do you do this work. Cities and governments oftentimes want to be involved in the small business space, and sometimes they actually do a little bit more lip service than probably they even want to do or would say themselves. But the idea is to how do you aggregate this in such a way and de-minimize the risk, because when you think about entrepreneurship, you really it's about one person or a group of people coming together to take a calculated risk. And so the city or a county or a governmental agency is looking to minimize that risk, because their responsibility is to the public. And so they have an audience that they have to cater to, and the general public is not having an appetite to have you throw away their money. And so we have to think of ways from an economic development, a program development standpoint, of how do you make this a win-win situation? How do you invest in what's needed in terms of entrepreneurs, and because they add quality to your life, to your city, to your community. When you think about a Jenny's, you come to Columbus to experience Jenny's or Grader's ice cream. So the point is that when you think about entrepreneurship and you think about it in the African American community, it's no different. You have to be able to minimize the risk. And so what we are doing in that regard is we are raising the awareness, number one, around entrepreneurship. We've always had it. How do you support it in a meaningful way, in an increased way? So in that regard, we're putting forth the strategy that's necessary to begin to really look at how we're moving the needle from year to year. Are we really making a difference? Are we creating more businesses? Are we creating more jobs? Those kinds of things like that is what we are doing at this point.
So, Henry, I mean, my next question was going to be about challenges that we still face. So, obviously, the risk and risk tolerance is one. What are a few other challenges that we still face in advancing this work?
Yeah, so this work has been really, really segmented in regards to, siloed, I should say, probably is a better word for it. It has not always gotten the level of attention that, pure economic development gets. I mean, when you think about economic development and workforce development, everybody from the governor down is basically, actually the president down for that matter, is front and center around big industry development. Small business development is isolated, is one or two guys off in a garage somewhere building a computer that nobody knows about until years later. So really trying to bring the awareness and attention around it and make it sexy. You gotta make entrepreneurship sexy. And it's the same thing in African American community. We must lift up entrepreneurship alongside workforce development. It's not an either or. You can have both. And so those are things that I think have to continue to happen. We also have to think about how do we continue to raise resources to do this work, because a lot of work in the small business arena, again, comparing it to the broader economic development field, is multiple touch points. It's, you have to touch that small business many, many, many times over many years sometimes to really get the fruit of the vine, if you will. And so it's not quite the same number of touch points, and the outcome is sometimes way quicker when you think about a big industry type of recruitment. It takes a minute to recruit them, but once they on the ground, they're there and they bring in 100 jobs. So it's just a longer process, and we have to keep people's appetite and attention focused in the right way, because it's a long sport.
Yeah, Henry, I wonder if you've talked before about the importance of mentorship and coaching, and if we're talking about zeroing in on the African American community, but your mentors and coaches are primarily white, does that present an issue that we're working on trying to overcome as well?
It does, actually. That's a very good point. It's a couple things that really plague us. And mentorship is certainly one. And so the other one is just being able to have the resources to acquire or buy or whatever, because often entrepreneurship is generational. It passes from one person to the next. So when you think about mentorship, that is exactly one of the work streams of the small business agenda. Focuses on the whole notion of cultural competency. When you think about, even from a technical assistance perspective or from a lender perspective, if you can't identify with your borrower or the person that's sitting across the desk in which you're trying to help, it makes it a little bit harder to get through to that person. And so, yes, mentorship is very important. We have to raise up more African American businesses, so we have more African American mentors. But I think that opportunity, to share is universal.
Right. All right. So you talked about a number of different strategies to move the needle. What, in your opinion, is sort of our ideal scenario in the Columbus region when you're going to be satisfied that we have indeed lifted up the small business community? We've got more minority-owned businesses doing business with anchor institution. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so for me, this work, when you look at the data and you think about the fact that most African businesses owned by African Americans or people of color, I'd say entrepreneurs of color, fail to retain or bring on at least one other employee. Most of these are one, half of a person, sometimes operations. And so if we can begin to see small businesses owned by people of color employing more people, it's going to make a better situation for everybody. I mean, and so that's the idea, is to not only see businesses start. We always talk about the number of startups and how we're doing in that regard, but we need to be looking at the number or the metric that shows how many employees are being added, particularly to our mainstream types of businesses and lifestyle types of businesses.
Right. Well, appreciate that, Henry. And you're doing a great service for our community. And I know I personally am excited to continue to support it. And I know our institution is behind you. So looking forward to the impact that this is going to make. So appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Appreciate it.